Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a writer and teacher whose show business roots and unique family circumstances gave him a remarkable sensibility as a storyteller and educator. His mother was one of the most beloved and respected actresses of her generation, Charlotte Rae. She was best known for her starring role as Mrs. Garrett in the popular TV sitcom The Facts of Life, for which she earned 2 Emmy nominations. She was also nominated for 2 Tony Awards for her work on Broadway. Although she passed away in 2018 at the age of 92, she lives on, not only in her many movie and television appearances, but in her wonderful book, The Facts of My Life, which our guest co-wrote with his mother in 2015. He's a gifted and prodigious writer of 5 novels, including his latest entitled Lightman. He also wrote a collection of essays about education entitled Students First and Other Lies. He's written articles in numerous publications, including the Huffington Post and USA Today. And if you grew up in the 80s, you might have seen some of the episodes he wrote for the first season of Transformers. I'm delighted to welcome Larry Strauss to our show. Larry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Larry, I must tell you that your mother's book, which you co-wrote, moved me so deeply on so many levels, not only because of the many challenges she had to live through, but because of her indomitable spirit and her ability to remain positive and optimistic through it all. She was really a remarkable woman, wasn't she?
Yeah, she absolutely was. It's easy as a son to take those things for granted. But I think the experience of helping her write the book, writing it with her, really gave me a deeper appreciation of everything she did, and her courage. And it may seem oddly simplistic and obvious to say it, but when people who achieve things are going through their lives, they don't know how it's going to turn out. When she came to New York in 1948, she didn't know she was going to be successful, and she had a lot of doubt. I mean, she was very determined, but she had a tremendous amount of doubt. And in retrospect, she had what most people would consider a lot of early success, but there were 2, 3, 4. There were years went by when it didn't happen. It didn't happen literally overnight. It just seems that way in retrospect.
Well, I want to say to our viewers that if you think you knew Charlotte Rae simply by watching her on The Facts of Life, believe me when I say that you didn't know her at all. This is a woman who struggled with profound feelings of insecurity. She had many ups and downs in her career before finally making it big on TV. She overcame alcoholism. She had a severely developmentally delayed child. Her 25-year marriage came to a shocking end when she found out her husband was gay. She dealt with some very serious illnesses. And Larry, when I finished reading your mother's book, I couldn't help thinking that very few adult children ever get to know their parent as well as you got to know your mom by co-writing that book with her. She poured her heart out in that book. Tell us about your emotional journey throughout that process.
It was a great experience, and I wish I'd done something like that with my father. Although, I certainly talked a lot with my father about things, about how his life had gone. It was a great opportunity for me. I would recommend it for anyone who has older parents who are still around and can still remember things. It was amazing how much she remembered. Although I should say she was in her late 80s when we were working on it, and it was not always easy to access those memories. Sometimes I had to write whole parts of her life from my memory of what she had told me before. And then when she read them, then it would all come back to her, and she could correct me and tell me more about what had happened.
Larry, I want to also acknowledge your dad, John Strauss, who was a musician and composer. He studied classical composition, but also wrote the theme music for Car 54, Where Are You? And the Phil Silvers Show. And he wrote an opera, which was broadcast on NBC. He had a very successful career in music editing and film and on TV, right?
Yes. Yeah. He's music editor, music supervisor. He also did sound editing. He was on Woody Allen's film. He did 3 of Woody Allen's films. So he did sound, and then he went on to music, and he did some very big movies. He was the music coordinator for Amadeus. For those who remember the story, it was Mozart and Salieri. And Salieri, there was a several times where they used Salieri's music in the film, and Milos Forman, I guess, didn't like. There was, for one of them, he didn't like anything of Salieri's. My father said, "Well, this is what he wrote." Like he said, and Milos was like, "Write something better, or write something that." So my father wrote a fake Salieri, and so he's sort of the other composer in that movie. Well, I guess there are 3 composers, because there's the real Salieri, and then there's Mozart, of course, and then John Strauss.
That's pretty impressive. Now, you had an older brother, Andy. He was severely autistic and also schizophrenic. Your mother explained in great detail in the book about the many challenges she faced throughout his life, trying to get him the care and the resources that he needed to live the best possible quality of life. I want to ask you, Larry, what was the impact on you of having a brother with special needs who demanded so much attention from your parents?
For me, in some ways, I saw my brother as special. I thought he had supernatural powers when I was very young, and because he could communicate with objects. He seemed to have secret messages that he could hear that I couldn't hear. As I got older, I became aware of that it was, a disability that he had, and that his life was not, was going to be crippled by it. And it was very sad for me, especially when as an adolescent, he became violent, and he ultimately did have to be institutionalized, despite my parents' efforts.
Well, your mother wrote that having a disabled brother gave you patience, persistence, understanding, and empathy. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All of us were in a continual project, to get him out of himself, and to make his life better, just more enjoyable. For me, a lot of it was just laughter. Like, I figured out at a pretty young age, I could get him to laugh. And then it was like we were together.
Do you think your experiences with your brother contributed to your skills as a teacher?
Absolutely. I don't think I could have had better training than the patience that required to help Andy to do anything. And just the tolerance. When I say patience, I don't even necessarily mean just patience in the moment when you're trying to get him to understand. When I was trying to get him to understand something, or I'm trying to get a student to understand something, or figure out how to do something. But I mean the long-term patience also, because with Andy, you could just give up and go, what's the point? But I didn't, because whatever small incremental progress is good. And so that's how I see students. A lot of my colleagues, I see their frustration. They go like, "Oh my God, this student doesn't know anything. How did he get to the 9th grade?" And I say to them, "Well, what are you going to do about that? You're not going to do anything about that. That's not helpful. That's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to the kid. All you can do is what you can do right now. And if you can make some progress and celebrate that progress, make a kid feel like they've succeeded at something, then they're going to make more progress." And yeah, I think I could not have had better training than growing up with my brother.
Now, your mom played some very memorable roles on stage and worked with some of the top people in the industry. She opened for Eartha Kitt and Pearl Bailey. She did the Threepenny Opera with B. Arthur. She starred on Broadway in Lil Abner. She did Shakespeare, Funny Girl, Into the Woods, Driving Miss Daisy. But am I right that her favorite role was Winnie in Happy Days, the play by Samuel Beckett?
Yes, she considered, I forget who it was who said it. She quoted somebody as saying that was the role for a female actor. her goal when she was younger was to be a great actress, not to be a comic actress, not to be a sitcom actress. She wanted to go on the stage and do the great roles. So for her, having the opportunity to do that when she was, I guess she was in her 60s when she did that, and that was a great moment for her. And then she got really good reviews too. Nothing meant more to her than that. None of her success on television or celebrity meant more to her than just being good at being a good actress.
And her film and television career was so diverse. She co-starred with Janet Leigh and Tony Randall in Hello Down There. She worked with Robert Redford and Gene Stapleton in The Hot Rock. She starred in Woody Allen's Bananas. She was Molly the letter carrier on Sesame Street. She was in You Don't Mess with the Zohan with Adam Sandler and Ricky and the Flash with Meryl Streep. And my personal favorite, Larry, is Queen of the Stardust Ballroom with Maureen Stapleton and Charles Durning, for which your mom got an Emmy nomination. Do you know if she had a favorite film or television role?
I know she really liked that movie. And I know Charles Durning was a friend of hers. They remained close. So I know she really loved working on that film.
And then, of course, she did all those Don't Squeeze the Charmin commercials on TV. Who didn't love your mother in those commercials?
Yeah, those were a lot of fun for her, too.
Now, you'll notice I have not spent much time talking about the facts of life because, as I understand it, your mom never really loved playing Mrs. Garrett. And in fact, after a few seasons, she got bored with the role. And after 7 seasons, she left the show despite being offered a huge pay increase. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think she was a little disappointed, although she understood. The audience for this show was Hugh and Young, and the girls were the focus, and it was never going to be about her. It was always going to be about, even when it was about her, it was about her and dealing with teenage girls. So yeah, I think she felt the limitations. I mean, look, let's face it, TV series, the idea of a TV series that goes on for 7, 8, 10 years, it's, there's only so much material. And then you kind of run out. I mean, the shows that are able to sustain themselves for even 5 years are, it's kind of incredible. You consider how many hours of drama, they're producing with these same characters. And so she felt that way. And when I found old scripts of hers from Facts of Life and other things, I found they were just covered in her notes, because even when she had a small part that maybe even the writers didn't think much about, she was like, what's my motivation? What's going on? What's my internal life in this moment? So she approached everything, as an artist and a professional. And so she didn't always, I mean, she did what she could with the material, but she often felt disappointed. And she would ask me, is there something better I can do here? And she'd go and challenge the writers. But ultimately, yeah, she felt like she enjoyed the success of it tremendously. And, she liked everybody she worked with on the show, but she started to feel like, what, is this it? And then, she'd had some health challenges. She had a pacemaker. She was, her father died at 58 or something, 57, 58 of a heart attack. She didn't know she was going to live to be 92. And so she felt like she was running out of time to do the things she wanted to do. And that having had 7 seasons of the show, now, she was going to have more opportunities, which she did.
So, Larry, I want to talk about you now. First of all, your parents divorced when you were 16, when your dad came out to your mom. Was your parents' separation a very traumatic time for you?
It was. I remember for about a week, I really felt traumatized by it. And I didn't understand it either. I think 16-year-olds might think of themselves as being independent. I mean, I certainly did. I didn't have really much to do with my parents at that point in my life. But to my shock, it really threw me. And then, and then I kind of, and then it kind of actually kind of turned me around. I mean, I was sort of drifting toward nowhere at that point in my life. I mean, it's funny to say that. I mean, at 16, it's very young, but I felt like, I'd never really taken school very seriously or thought much about my future. And actually that kind of jolted me to do that. I guess it was sort of like the realization that my parents have their own lives and I am not the focus of their lives. It was like a final revelation to me that I was kind of on my own, which was a good thing. That I had to live my life for me and figure it out. And I got motivated. It's when I started writing.
Well, you've written 5 novels. I want to start with Fake Out, which is about a basketball coach. If I'm not mistaken, you're a basketball coach as well. How much of Larry Strauss is there in your lead character?
Well, it's funny you say that. Because I wrote the book before I was a coach. It's funny how that happens. That by the time it was published, I was coaching.
And then you also wrote One Man, One Vote, which is a cynical look at how a dysfunctional mayor of a California town becomes the most powerful man in America by getting to choose the next president. What inspired that story?
I think stories come to you out of the madness going on around you. And it's funny to think of that novel now. It seems so quaint compared to, what's happened in the last year in our country, in our politics. But I guess the electoral college system to me just seemed like so absurd. And I didn't really even understand as much about it as I do today about what motivated it and why we had it and why we still have it. But just the idea that when you have an electoral college system, there are possibilities that the will of the people can be thwarted. So I thought kind of a comic look at what if one guy could sell his electoral vote to the highest bidder? How would that go?
Now, moving on to Unfinished Business, which is about a Los Angeles teacher who's gunned down in his classroom. A former student at the school is the detective in charge of solving the case. Where did that story idea come from?
That was from my early days teaching in South LA in the 90s. It actually did not seem far-fetched to me at all, that story. It was a very violent time in the inner city where I was working. My students were almost all traumatized by the violence around them. Some of them went on to sadly, tragically become victims of that violence, either being shot themselves or getting swept up into it and ending up in prison for having committed violence. And, it's sort of a combination of that experience and just all the dysfunction of the education system. I mean, I felt like we, the teachers at my school, on the front lines, that we were doing what we could, and we were bringing our humanity and our talents and our courage to bear, but that the system beyond us and above us and behind us had no clue.
Now, your 4th novel is Now's the Time, about a female jazz musician who searches for the lost tape of her father's last gig before he died. I understand you were inspired by the jazz trumpet player Clifford Brown. Is that right?
Yeah. Clifford Brown was a great technician, a great artist, a beautiful man who died in his 20s in a car accident, tragically. I was in a record store that had a great jazz selection. I was there looking through the bins, and there was a guy next to me. Anyway, he told me a story which inspired the novel, and the story was just that when Clifford Brown died in that car accident, that there was a tape in that car of the last gig they'd done, like that night. And the tape was the only thing that survived the car accident. And Max Roach, the great Max Roach, drummer in that band, that he ended up with that tape, but was too heartbroken to listen to it for many years. But that was the inspiration for the story. The novel is actually about a woman trying to make it in New York as a trumpet player. Anyway, she's trying to make it. It has a lot of self-doubt. And I made her the daughter of the piano player in that car accident. And so she decides, rather than pursue her own legacy, she's gonna do tribute to him. She's gonna do honor to her father. She's gonna find that tape and straighten, and let the world know what a brilliant man he was. She ends up reclaiming herself through the process of the tape, of finding the tape.
Okay, Larry, let's talk about your latest novel, Light Man. It's about an unlikely friendship between two emotionally damaged men in New York City in the 70s. One of the men has a problematic son, and his wife is an actress, and they're tormented because they just can't fix the son's problems. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this story hits pretty close to home, Larry. Am I right?
You are correct. You are correct. And actually, I've been trying to write about this part of my life for many years without success. I always tell my students when they try to write about themselves how hard it is to get perspective and how hard it is to really write well if you don't have perspective, if you're too much in it. You need to be in it, but you need to be able to observe it also. I almost feel like Mike is my father's alter ego. My father was one of the nicest people I've ever known, and nice, kind, gentle, generous, forgiving, but he always admired people who were angry. He always connected, like he wanted permission to be angry and never allowed himself, and I, of course, to me, I would take my father any day over an angry person. But he always, I get the feeling that he always felt like he wanted to be a little more assertive in that way.
Well, look at how much he suppressed.
Right, exactly, right. And so Mike, the character Mike, is kind of like kind of in honor of my father. He's sort of the man my father might have liked to be more like. And Al is this guy who just walks up to him one night. The more I got into the book, the more he became sort of the eyes through which to see this family. And so I was able to get much greater perspective that way, rather than being in it, being outside of it. And so, yeah, it's very autobiographical, but from a different angle.
Well, is Light Man as close as it gets to you writing about your family, or is there another book in you that will explore some of the themes in your parents' marriage? Because Larry, I can see a book there.
I think certainly this may not be the end of it, I'm also open to writing more of a memoir about them and about my relationship with my father.
Well, is writing therapeutic for you?
Yeah, it's like survival for me. It's mental, emotional survival for me to write. I mean, I think it's a way of imposing order on the chaos of the world, of our lives, and the emotional chaos. It's a way to make sense out of the storm.
Well, you also wrote a collection of essays about the education system called Students First and Other Lies. Now, you've been a high school English teacher in South Los Angeles since you were in your 30s. You're a very strong advocate for public education. What do you think makes a great teacher?
Well, the number one prerequisite is you got to love the kids, no matter what, because they're especially if you're working with teenagers, but I mean, even if you're working with little kids, it's a struggle. Childhood is a struggle. I mean, it's never been easy. It's certainly become excruciatingly hard now, particularly in the last few years. But so as a high school teacher, you're meeting students in their worst time, the worst time of their life, in their worst moments, and especially, in the inner city, what you find a lot of is you find families that that have nothing left to give them. It's like you're 17, you're 18, we're done with you, kind of thing. Not everyone, But, you know, a lot of them, they have younger siblings. Their parents are exhausted. Their families are in crisis. One of the parents has been deported. One of the parents has died. You know, there's the family's been fractured. Oh, there's, you know, by the time they get to high school, everything seems to be coming apart. And so they're at their worst, and they need us to love them, even when they're acting incorrigible and awful. And, you know, and if I feel bad for teachers who don't feel that way, who just, they're teaching because they want to impart their passion to young people, and they meet with nothing but frustration because it's just, it doesn't work. It's not that easy.
Well, a lot of teachers I know resent the fact that they are being required to do more parenting than teaching.
Right. And I mean, they're perfectly justified in feeling that way, but their resentment isn't going to solve anything. Yeah, I think it's a much easier road to just embrace the role that you're going to be a parent too. You're going to be a psychologist. You're going to be all these other things, because that's what's needed right now.
Well, I happen to think that teachers are among the most underappreciated professionals in our society. Many people have no idea the difference that one teacher can make in a child's life. And Larry, I'm living proof of that, because I was really badly bullied as a kid, and I was literally rescued by a teacher who looked out for me and protected me, and we're still very close friends. So I want to thank you, Larry, for all that you do to inspire and encourage your students to make something good of their lives.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing that. I think it's very important for us to remember that sometimes the most important thing we can do is, you know, identify. I heard this story. I don't know if it's true. It's one of those things you see on social media, is about a teacher, elementary school teacher. And every Friday she would ask the students to write down, to respond to this prompt, which is like, you know, what do you like to do? Who do you like to play with? It's a very simple idea. And I get emotional just talking about this. And she would read these every Friday. And the purpose was, she would always look for which kids nobody said they liked playing with. Who were the kids who were not anybody's favorite, who never came up? And that's who she focused. And she knew, like, I got to help those kids. I got to help them feel okay. I got to help integrate them better into the class. You know, and it's easy to forget that. I find so often that educators want to focus on the kids who need us the least, the kids who would be fine without us, who are self-motivated and brilliant. And yeah, we can give them something, but, you know, stop ignoring the ones who make it hard for us, who don't make us feel like good teachers, who make us frustrated. They're the ones who need us the most. And often they're the ones who act like they don't need us at all, you know, but they do.
Well, Larry, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and chatting about your wonderful mom and your amazing books. I wish you the best of luck with Light Man. I hope you'll come back to our show with every new book that you write.
I will. Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Larry.
Thank you.
Our guest has been author and teacher Larry Strauss. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.